Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome back to Cat Tales, the Warrior Cats podcast. My name is Coffee, and I'm your host. I'm a 23-year-old who is rereading the Warrior Cats books for the first time since I was a kid. I've read all of these before, and I know this material very well, and this is episode 2. So today we're going to be covering chapters 4 through 7 of Warriors Into the Wild by Erin Hunter. Last time we left off, we met Rusty, our protagonist. He's a young orange cat. He leaves his housefolk, aka Two Legs, to join ThunderClan, one of the clans that live in the forest, next to his two-leg house. So he joins the clan, and he's introduced. He gets in a fight with a cat named Longtail. After this fight is over, he loses his collar, and he earns his new apprentice name, which is Firepaw. And then he's welcomed into the clan, and then all of a sudden we learn that Redtail, the clan deputy, is dead. Beginning of chapter 4, the clan is just reacting to the news that Redtail is dead. Ravenpaw, the apprentice who delivered the news, is very much injured. He's bleeding from a deep gash on his shoulder. He says they met 5 RiverClan warriors beside the stream, not far from the Sunning Rocks. Oakheart was among them. Oakheart, Greypaw gasped beside Firepaw. He is the deputy of RiverClan. He's one of the greatest warriors in the forest. Lucky Ravenpaw. Wish it could have been me. Greypaw was silenced by a fierce glance from the old Grey Tom who had first sensed Ravenpaw's return. Greypaw, being jealous of not witnessing a deputy and a strong male cat fighting. Okay, I know what you are. You're not beating the bisexual allegations. And then Ravenpaw continues. He says, Redtail warned Oakheart to keep his hunting parties out of ThunderClan territory. He said the next RiverClan warrior to be caught in ThunderClan territory would be killed, but Oakheart would not back down. He said his clan had to be fed whatever we threatened. Ravenpaw paused to wheeze for breath. His wound was still bleeding heavily, and he stood awkwardly to keep the weight off his shoulder. That's when the RiverClan cats attacked. It was hard to see what was happening. The fighting was vicious. I saw Oakheart had Redtail pinned to the ground, but then Redtail... Suddenly, Ravenpaw's eyes rolled in his head, and he lurched sideways. Half scrambling, half falling, he slithered off the high rock and collapsed on the ground below. A ginger queen comes and gets him, and she calls out, Spotted Leaf! And then the pretty tortoiseshell Firepaw had noticed earlier hurries over to Ravenpaw. She rolls him over and takes a good look at the wound. She says, It's all right, Golden Flower. His wounds aren't fatal, but I'll need to fetch some cobwebs to stop the bleeding. And she goes back to her den. And then we hear a mournful howl from the camp entrance. A massive dark brown tabby staggered through the gorse tunnel. Between his sharp teeth, the warrior held not prey, but the lifeless body of another cat. He dragged the tattered creature into the center of the clearing. Firepaw craned his neck and glimpsed a flash of bright ginger tail hanging limply in the dust. What a crazy first day. Imagine you witness a dead body on the first day of school. This series is like Euphoria, but for furries. And then Greypaw is kind of... He begins to grieve once he sees Redtail's dead body. Bluestar asks, How did this happen, Tigerclaw? So we learn that the cat who's carrying Redtail into camp is Tigerclaw, who we saw in the prologue. Tigerclaw says, He died with honor, struck down by Oakheart. I couldn't save him, but I managed to take Oakheart's life while he was still gloating over his victory. He just casually mentions he murdered Oakheart, and nobody reacts. Hello? Like, literally nobody reacts to this, which is crazy. Because, like, one of the things about the Warrior Code is that you should not kill other cats. You should avoid it at all costs. But the clan is just like, oh, okay. No, that's fine. Valid. Anyway, Tigerclaw continues. Redtail's death was not in vain, for I doubt we'll see RiverClan hunters in our territory again. Greypaw looks really sad. And then, after a moment's pause, several of the cats moved forward to lick Redtail's bedraggled fur. As they groomed, they purred hushed phrases to the dead warrior. Firepaw whispered into Greypaw's ear, What are they doing? Greypaw didn't take his eyes off the dead cat as he replied. His spirit may have left to join StarClan, but the clan will share tongues with Redtail one last time. StarClan? Firepaw echoed. It's the tribe of heavenly warriors that watches over all clan cats. You can see them in Silverpelt. Firepaw looked confused, so Greypaw explained, Silverpelt is that thick band of stars you see each night stretching across the sky. Each star is a StarClan warrior. Redtail will be among them tonight. Silverpelt is a cool name for the stars in the sky. I wish we had a cooler name than just space. Greypaw steps forward to mourn Redtail. Bluestar leaps down from the high rock and walks towards Redtail's body. And then she shares tongues with him as well, just kind of licks his fur and grieves him. When she finishes, She speaks. Her voice was low and thick with grief, and the clan listened in silence. Redtail was a brave warrior. His loyalty to ThunderClan could never be doubted. I always relied on his judgment, for it bore witness to the needs of the clan, and was never swayed by self-interest or pride. He would have made a fine leader. Then she lowered herself onto her belly, her head bowed, her paws stretched neatly before her, and silently she grieved for her lost friend. Several other cats came and lay down beside her, their bowed heads and hunched backs echoing her mournful pose. Firepaw watched. He had not known Redtail, but he couldn't help feeling moved as he witnessed the clan mourn. Greypaw came and stood beside him again. Dustpaw will be sad, he remarked. Dustpaw? Redtail's apprentice. That brown-striped tabby over there. I wonder who his new mentor will be? Firepaw glanced over at the small Tom who squatted near Redtail's body, staring unseeing at the ground. Firepaw looked past him to the clan leader. How long will Bluestar sit with him? He asked. Probably the whole night, replied Greypaw. Redtail was her deputy for many, many moons. She won't want to let him go too quickly. He was one of her best warriors. Not as big and powerful as Tigerclaw or Lionheart, but quick and clever. Firepaw looked at Tigerclaw, admiring the strength that swelled in his powerful muscles and broad head. His massive body showed signs of his warrior life. One of his ears was split into a deep V shape, and a thick scar sliced the bridge of his nose. Least obvious villain design. Tigerclaw stands up and goes over to Ravenpaw, who is still being taken care of by Spotted Leaf. Spotted Leaf is using her teeth and front paws to press wads of cobweb onto his shoulder wound. Firepaw asks Greypaw what Spotted Leaf is doing, and he says she's stopping the bleeding. Ravenpaw seems really shaken up. He's always been a bit jumpy, but I've never seen him this bad before, which is interesting. He did just see a cat die, though. Let's go and see if he's woken up yet. And then they go to see if Ravenpaw's woken up, but they kind of stop a little distance away because Tigerclaw's talking to Spotted Leaf. Tigerclaw saying, "How is he? Do you think you can save him? I've spent a lot of time training him up, and I don't want my efforts to be wasted at the first battle." Spotted Leaf didn't look up from her patient as she replied, "Yes, a pity if, after all your valuable training, he dies in his first fight, eh? Oh, this is hilarious! You can't help but love her." Tigerclaw asks if he'll live, and Spotted Leaf says, of course, he just needs to rest. Tigerclaw then starts jabbing Ravenpaw with one of his front claws, and he says, "Come on then, get up." Ravenpaw doesn't move because he's passed out. Firepaw says, "Look at the length of that claw." Greypaw says, "Too right. I know I wouldn't want to get into a fight with him." "Not so fast, Tigerclaw." Spotted Leaf placed her paw over Tigerclaw's sharp talon and gently moved it away. "This apprentice needs to keep as still as possible until the cut has healed. We don't want him opening his wound by jumping about trying to please you. Leave him alone." I love her. She's iconic. Firepaw found himself holding his breath as he waited for Tigerclaw's reaction. He guessed that few cats dared to give orders to the warrior like that. The big tabby stiffened and seemed about to speak when Spotted Leaf mewed teasingly. "Even you know better than to argue with a medicine cat, Tigerclaw." Tigerclaw says, "I wouldn't dare argue with you, dear Spotted Leaf." Ew. He turns to leave and sees Greypaw and Firepaw. "Who's this?" he asked Greypaw, towering above them. Greypaw says, "He's the new apprentice." Tigerclaw says, "He smells like a kitty pet." "I was a house cat," Firepaw meowed boldly, "but I'm going to train to be a warrior." Tigerclaw looked at him with sudden interest. "Ah, yes, now I remember. Bluestar mentioned that she had stumbled across some stray kitty pet. So she's actually going to try you out, is she?" Firepaw sat up very straight, anxious to impress this distinguished clan warrior. "That's right," he mewed respectfully. Tigerclaw eyed him thoughtfully. "Then I shall watch your progress with interest." Firepaw puffed his chest out proudly as Tigerclaw stalked away. "Do you think he liked me?" "I don't think Tigerclaw likes any apprentices," whispered Greypaw. "Imagine having beef with 12-year-olds. Couldn't be me." And then Ravenpaw stirs and twitches his ears. "Has he gone?" he mumbled. I love that he was pretending to be asleep. He's so real for that. Greypaw says, "Yep, he's gone." Firepaw begins to introduce himself. Spotted Leaf says, "Go away, both of you. How am I meant to help this cat with all these interruptions?" And she dismisses them. Firepaw realized she was serious, despite the lively glimmer in her warm amber eyes. And Greypaw's like, "All right, we'll leave. I'll show you around." And they say bye to Ravenpaw. And then they begin a tour of the camp. "House tour! Yippee!" Greypaw looked thoughtful. He was clearly taking his duties as a guide very seriously. "You know the high rock already," he began, flicking his tail toward the big, smooth rock. Bluestar always addresses the clan from there. "Her den is down there." He lifted his nose toward a hollow in the side of the high rock. Her den was carved out many moons ago by an ancient stream. Hanging lichen draped the entrance, sheltering the leader's nest from wind and rain. "The warriors sleep over here," Greypaw went on. Firepaw followed him to a large bush a few paces away from the high rock. There was a clear view from here right down to the gorse entrance into the camp. The branches of the bush hung low, but Firepaw could see a sheltered space inside where the warriors made their nests. The senior warriors sleep nearest the center, where it's warmest, explained Greypaw. They usually share their fresh kill together over by that clump of nettles. Fresh kill is the prey and the small animals that they catch to eat. The younger warriors eat nearby. Sometimes they are invited to join the senior warriors for eating, which is a big honor. What about the other clan cats? Firepaw asked, fascinated, but feeling rather overwhelmed by all the traditions and rituals of clan life. Greypaw says, well, the queens share warrior quarters when they work as warriors, but when they're expecting kits or nursing them, they stay in a nest near the nursery. So my question is every she-cat expected to have kits? Because that's not very woke. But then again, this book was written in 2003, so I'm going to move on. Greypaw says, the elders have their own place on the other side of the clearing. Come on, I'll show you. And then they go past the medicine cat den to the elder's den. They stop beside a fallen tree that shelters a patch of grass. Crouched among the soft greenery were 4 elderly cats tucking into a plump young rabbit. Dustpaw and Sandpaw would have brought them that, whispered Greypaw. One of the apprentice's duties is catching fresh kill for the elders. Hello, youngster, one of the elders greeted Greypaw. Hello, small ear, mewed Greypaw, nodding respectfully. This must be our new apprentice. Firepaw, isn't it? Meowed a second Tom. His patchy fur was dark brown, and there was only a stump where his tail should have been. That's right, Firepaw replied, copying Greypaw's polite nod. I'm Half-Tail, purred the brown Tom. It's a little on the nose. Welcome to the clan. Have you two eaten? Meowed Small Ear. Firepaw and Greypaw both shook their heads. Well, there's enough here. Dustpaw and Sandpaw are turning into fine hunters. Would you mind if these youngsters shared a mouse, One Eye? The pale gray queen who lay beside him shook her head. Firepaw noticed one of her eyes was clouded and sightless. Daring, aren't we? Real creative names. What about you, Dappletail? The other elder, a tortoiseshell she-cat with a gray muzzle, meowed in a voice cracked with age. Of course not. And then Greypaw says, thank you. He takes a mouse. He asks Firepaw if he still hasn't tasted mouse, and Firepaw says no, and he gets really excited at the prospect of tasting a mouse for the first time. Greypaw lets him have the first bite. Firepaw crouched down and took a large bite from the mouse. It was juicy and tender and sang with the flavors of the forest. Firepaw says it's fantastic, and then Greypaw joins him in eating the mouse. As the 2 apprentices shared the mouse, they listened to the elders talk among themselves. How long before Blue Star appoints a new deputy? Asked Small Ear. What did you say, Small Ear? Mewed One Eye. I think your hearing has become as poor as your eyesight, snapped Small Ear impatiently. Okay, go off. I said, how long before Blue Star appoints a new deputy? One Eye ignored Small Ear's irritated reply and spoke instead to the tortoiseshell queen. Dappletail, do you remember the day many moons ago when Blue Star herself was appointed deputy? Dappletail mewed earnestly. Oh, yes. It was not long after she lost her kits. Ooh, Blue Star lore. She'll not be happy to be appointing a new deputy, Small Ear observed. Redtail served her long and well, but she'll need to make up her mind quickly. According to clan custom, the choice has to be made before moon high after the death of the old deputy, which is honestly kind of fast. It's like, okay, the cat dies, they can mourn for like an hour, and then you appoint a new one. Which, like, I guess I get, because, you know, if the vice president of the United States dies, you know, you kind of have to appoint a new one, but it's still crazy. At least this time the choice is obvious, meowed Half-Tail. Firepaw raised his head and looked around the clearing. Who could Half-Tail mean? To Firepaw, all the warriors looked worthy of becoming deputy. Perhaps he meant Tigerclaw. After all, he had avenged Redtail's death. Tigerclaw was sitting not far off, his ears angled toward the elder's conversation. Bro, mind your business. And then the conversation is cut off. Blue Star is ready to appoint a new deputy. She says, a new deputy must be appointed. But first, let us give thanks to StarClan for the life of Redtail. Tonight he sits with his fellow warriors among the stars. Silence fell as all the cats looked up into the sky, which was beginning to darken as evening crept over the forest. And now I shall name ThunderClan's new deputy, Blue Star continued. I say these words before the body of Redtail so that his spirit may hear and approve my choice. Firepaw looked at Tigerclaw. He couldn't help noticing the hunger in the big warrior's amber eyes as he stared up at the high rock. Lionheart, meowed Blue Star, will be the new deputy of ThunderClan. Firepaw was curious to see Tigerclaw's reaction, but the dark warrior's face revealed nothing as he moved to congratulate Lionheart, with a nudge so hearty that it almost pushed the golden tabby off balance. Firepaw asks Greypaw why she didn't make Tigerclaw deputy. Greypaw says Lionheart has more experience. Blue Star keeps talking. Redtail was also mentor to young Dustpaw. Since there must be no delay in the training of our apprentices, I shall appoint Dustpaw's new mentor immediately. Darkstripe, you are ready for your first apprentice, so you will continue Dustpaw's training. You had a fine mentor in Tigerclaw, and I expect you to pass on some of the excellent skills you were taught. So that's why Darkstripe is like that, if he had Tigerclaw as a mentor. Darkstripe swells with pride as he shows his acceptance with a solemn nod. He strode over to Dustpaw, bent his head, and rather awkwardly touched noses with his new apprentice. Dustpaw flicked his tail respectfully, but his eyes were still dull with grief for his lost mentor. Bluestar says, I shall keep a vigil with Redtail's body tonight before we bury him at sunrise. And then she jumps off the high rock and walks over to lie beside Redtail's body once more. Firepaw asks if they should sit with them too, but he doesn't really want to. All he wants to do is find somewhere warm and dry to curl up and sleep. Bro, what do you mean sitting next to a dead body all night doesn't sound fun? Sounds like a party to me. Greypaw says no, only those who are closest to Redtail will share his final night. I'll show you where we sleep. The apprentice's den is over here. Firepaw follows Greypaw to a thick bush of ferns that lay behind a mossy tree stump. Greypaw says all the apprentices share their fresh kill by the stump. Firepaw asks how many there are. Greypaw says not as many as usual, just me, you, Ravenpaw, Dustpaw, and Sandpaw. As Greypaw and Firepaw settled themselves beside the tree stump, a young she-cat crawled out from beneath the ferns. Her coat was ginger like Firepaw's, but much paler, with barely visible stripes of darker fur. So here comes the new apprentice, she meowed, narrowing her eyes. Hello, Firepaw mewed. The young cat sniffed rudely. He smells like a kitty pet. Don't tell me I'm going to have to share my nest with that revolting stench. Firepaw felt rather taken aback. Since his fight with Longtail, all the cats had been quite friendly. Maybe they had just been distracted by Ravenpaw's news, he thought. You'll have to excuse Sandpaw, apologized Greypaw. I think she must have a fur ball stuck somewhere. She's not usually this bad-tempered. I love him. 10 out of 10, no notes. Whitestorm comes up. He says, Sandpaw, as my apprentice, I expected you to be a little more welcoming to this newcomer. Sandpaw says, I'm sorry, Whitestorm. She doesn't sound sorry at all. I just didn't expect to be training with a kitty pet, that's all. So the whole clan is xenophobic. Got it. And Whitestorm says, I'm sure you'll get used to it. It's getting late. Training starts tomorrow. You three should get some sleep. He gave Sandpaw a stern look, and she nodded obediently. As he walked off, she spun around and vanished into the clump of ferns, sniffing once more as she brushed past Firepaw. Firepaw asks where he sleeps. Sandpaw says, anywhere, just so long as it's not near me. She reminds me of, if anyone watched the Land Before Time movies, she reminds me of Sarah from the Land Before Time. Like, she is so annoying. Kind of in a good way, though, like in a funny way. Greypaw and Firepaw exchanged glances, but said nothing. Firepaw rigged together a pile of moss with his claws. When he had gathered his bed into a cozy nest, he circled until it was comfortable and settled down. His whole body felt drowsy with contentment. This was his home now. He was a member of ThunderClan. And that's the end of Chapter 4. Chapter 5. Hey, Firepaw, wake up! Greypaw's meow broke into Firepaw's dream. He had been chasing a squirrel up and up into the topmost branches of a tall oak. Training begins at sunrise. Dustpaw and Sandpaw are already up, Greypaw added urgently. Firepaw stretched sleepily, then remembered. Today was his first day of training. He leaped to his paws. His drowsiness evaporated as excitement surged through his veins. Greypaw says he spoke to Lionheart. Ravenpaw won't be joining us. He's still not better yet. Dustpaw and Sandpaw are hunting. So Lionheart thought him and Firepaw could train with him and Tigerclaw this morning. Greypaw led Firepaw quickly through the gorse entrance of the camp and up the side of the rock-strewn valley. As they climbed over the crest of the ravine, a cool breeze ruffled their fur. Fat white clouds raced across the blue sky overhead. Firepaw felt fierce joy well up inside him as he followed Greypaw down a tree-shaded slope and into a sandy hollow. Tigerclaw and Lionheart were indeed waiting, sitting a few tail lengths apart on the sun-warmed sand. Tigerclaw says, in the future, I expect you both to be punctual. Lionheart says, don't be too severe. It was a busy night last night. I expect they were tired. He tells Firepaw, you don't have a mentor yet, but for now, Tigerclaw and I will share your training. Firepaw nodded enthusiastically, his tail held high, unable to distinguish his delight at having two such great warriors as his mentor. He's so wholesome. And then Tigerclaw says, come, today we are going to show you the edges of our territory so that you know where you will be hunting and what boundaries you need to protect. Greypaw, it won't do you any harm to remind yourself of the clan's outer limits, and this is referencing him going into the two-leg place where he found Firepaw. So they start the tour of the territory. Another tour, yippee! The trees were thick in this part of the forest, birch and ash trees overshadowed by mighty oaks. The ground was carpeted with crisp dead leaves that rustled beneath their paws. Tigerclaw paused to spray his scent on a thick clump of ferns. The other cat stopped beside him. So I think they mark their borders by peeing. I haven't looked up whether cats have... I know cats have, like, the specific scent glands on, like, their cheeks and stuff like that. I don't know about anywhere else. I don't think they're skunks. Like, I don't think they have a specific, like, scent spray that they do. I don't know. I think they just pee on places like dogs. Lionheart says, "There's a two-leg path here. Use your nose, Firepaw. Can you smell anything?" Firepaw sniffed. There was the faint scent of a two-leg and the stronger smell of a dog, familiar to him from his old home. "A two-leg has walked his dog along here, but they are gone now," he mewed. "Good," meowed Lionheart. "Do you think it is safe to cross?" Firepaw sniffed again. The odors were weak and seemed overlaid with fresher forest smells. "Yes," he replied. Tigerclaw nodded, and the four cats stalked out from beneath the ferns and crossed the sharp stones of the narrow two-leg path. The trees beyond were pine. They grew tall and straight, row after row. It was easy to walk silently here. The ground was thick with layers of dead needles, which prickled against Firepaw's pads but felt spongy underneath. There was no undergrowth here to hide in, and Firepaw sensed tension in the other cats as they stalked unprotected between the tree trunks. "Two legs put these trees here," meowed Tigerclaw. "They cut them down with foul-smelling creatures which spew enough fumes to make a kit go blind. Then they take the fallen trees to the tree-cut place that lies near here." The tree-cut place is probably like a lumberjack establishment or like a log-cutting place. A loggery? I don't know if that's a real name. I probably sound dumb right now. Like, I didn't look up anything while I was reading this chapter. I was just like, I don't know what this is. I'm going to make up a word. Okay. Firepaw stopped and listened for the roar of the tree-eater, which he had heard before. "The tree-cut place will be silent for a few moons more, until the time of Greenleaf," explained Greypaw, noticing his pause. The cats walk on through the forest. Tigerclaw points out two-leg place. He kind of throws shade at Firepaw and says Firepaw can probably smell it, but they pass by it, and then Greypaw says, "We're approaching RiverClan territory. The Sunning Rocks are over there." He pointed with his soft muzzle to a treeless mound of boulders. Firepaw felt his fur stand on end. This was where Redtail had been slain. Lionheart stopped by a flat gray rock. "This is the boundary between ThunderClan and RiverClan territory. RiverClan rules the hunting grounds beside the Great River. Breathe deeply, Firepaw." The pungent smell of unfamiliar cats hit the roof of Firepaw's mouth. He was surprised how different it smelled from the warm cat scents of the ThunderClan camp. And he was also surprised to realize just how familiar and comforting the ThunderClan scents seemed to him already. "That is the smell of RiverClan," Tigerclaw growled beside him. "Remember it well. It will be strongest at the boundary, because their warriors will have scent-marked the trees along here." With these words, the dark tabby lifted his tail and sprayed his own mark on the flat rock. Okay, I don't think we really need the details of peeing on the trees and marking the borders and stuff. I think we understand what's going on by this point. Lionheart says, "We'll follow this boundary line as it leads straight to 4 trees. Firepaw asks, "What's 4 trees?" Greypaw's like, "It's where the territories of all 4 clans meet. There are 4 great oaks there, as old as the clans." "Be quiet," ordered Tigerclaw. "Don't forget how close we are to enemy territory." So the apprentices quiet down. By the time they reached 4 trees, Firepaw was feeling completely out of breath and his paws ached. He wasn't used to traveling so far and so fast. He was quite relieved when Lionheart and Tigerclaw led them out of the thick woods and stopped at the brow of a bush-covered slope. It was sun-high now. The clouds had cleared and the wind had dropped. Below, in the dazzling sunlight, stood 4 enormous oaks, their dark green crowns reaching almost to the top of the steep slope. Lionheart says, "As Greypaw told you, this is 4 trees, where the territories of all 4 clans meet. WindClan governs the high ground ahead of us, where the sun sets. You won't be able to catch their scent today. The wind is blowing toward them. But you'll learn it soon enough." Greypaw says, "And ShadowClan holds power over there, in the darkest part of the forest. The elders say that the cold winds from the north blow over the ShadowClan cats and chill their hearts." "So many clans!" Firepaw exclaimed. "And so well organized," he added to himself, remembering Smudge's lurid tales of wild cats wreaking terror in the forest. This made me laugh. 10 out of 10. Lionheart says, "You see now why prey is so precious. Why we must fight to protect what little we have." Firepaw claps back and says, "But that seems foolish. Why can't the clans work together and share their hunting grounds instead of fighting each other?" "Socialist Firepaw! Based!" But all the cats just stare at him. And Tigerclaw says, "That is treacherous thinking." Lionheart tells Tigerclaw, "Don't be too fierce. The ways of the clans are new to Firepaw." And he says, "You speak from your heart, young Firepaw. This will make you a stronger warrior one day." Tigerclaw growled, "Or it might make him give in to kitty pet weakness right at the moment of attack." Lionheart glanced briefly at Tigerclaw before he continued. "The 4 clans do come together peacefully in a gathering each moon. Here," he bent his head toward the 4 mighty oaks below, "is where they meet. The truce lasts for as long as the moon is at its fullest." "Then there must be a meeting very soon?" Firepaw suggested, remembering how bright the moonlight had been the night before. "Indeed there is," answered Lionheart, sounding impressed. "Tonight, in fact. The gatherings are very important because they allow the clans to come together in peace for one night. But you must understand that longer alliances bring more trouble than they're worth." Tigerclaw agrees and says, "It is our clan loyalty that makes us strong. If you weaken that loyalty, you weaken our chances of survival." Firepaw understands, and then they keep moving. They paced along the ridge of the valley where 4 trees stood. Now they were heading away from the sun as it began to sink in the afternoon sky. They crossed the stream at a place where it was narrow enough to leap over in one jump. Firepaw sniffed the air. A new cat scent touched his mouth glands, strong and sour. "Which clan is that?" he asked. "Shadow Clan," answered Tigerclaw grimly. "We are traveling along their border. Keep your wits about you, Firepaw. Fresher scents mean that a Shadow Clan patrol is in the area." As Firepaw nodded, he heard a new noise. He stiffened, but the other cats kept up their pace, heading straight for the ominous rumbling. Firepaw doesn't know what that is. He stops at the edge of the woods. There's an odor that reminds him of his old two-leg home, and a really loud rumbling. Tigerclaw says, "This is the Thunder Path." Firepaw could see a gray path like a river cutting its way through the forest. The hard gray stone stretched ahead of him so far that the trees on the other side seemed blurred and tiny. Firepaw shuddered at the bitter smell that rose from the path. Next moment he leaped back, his fur bristling, as a gigantic monster roared past. The branches of the trees on either side flapped madly in the wind that chased the speeding monster. Firepaw stared around at the other cats, his eyes wide, unable to speak. He had seen paths like this before near his old two-leg home, but never this wide, nor with monsters so swift and fierce. Greypaw says, "It scared me the first time, too, but at least it helps to keep Shadow Clan warriors from crossing into our territory. The Thunder Path runs for many paw steps along our boundary line. And don't worry, those monsters never seem to leave the Thunder Path. You'll be fine as long as you don't go too near. So yeah, if you haven't figured it out by now, the Thunder Path is a road and monsters are cars." Lionheart says, "Alright, it's time to go back to camp. I expect you're getting tired." Firepaw is tired. So they head back to camp. When they get back, Dustpaw and Sandpaw are already there, and they're eating some fresh kill. "Hi there, kitty pet," mewed Dustpaw, narrowing his eyes scornfully at Firepaw. "Enjoy the food we caught for you." "Who knows, you might even learn to catch your own one day," sneered Sandpaw. Greypaw asks, "Are you two still on hunting duty?" The sass. I imagine the tone he takes is like, "Oh, all right." Then he says, "Never mind. We've been patrolling our territory borders. You'll be glad to know all is safe." Dustpaw says, "I'm sure the other clans were terrified when they smelled you two coming." Greypaw claps back and says, "They didn't even dare show their faces." And then Sandpaw says, "Well, we'll ask them tonight when we see them at the gathering." "Are you going?" Firepaw blurted out, impressed in spite of the apprentice's hostility. "Of course," replied Dustpaw loftily. "It's a great honor, you know. But don't worry, we'll tell you all about it in the morning." They start to ignore Dustpaw's gloating, and then Firepaw and Greypaw start eating some dinner. And then Blue Star calls the cats together for a gathering. Dustpaw and Sandpaw get to their feet. Sandpaw says, "Bye, you two. Have a nice, quiet evening." And she's like, God, she's so annoying. Firepaw asks if Greypaw's ever been to a gathering. Greypaw says, "Not yet, but it won't be long now. All the apprentices get to go sometime." They finish their dinner, and then they go to bed. They wake up the next morning. Firepaw wants to know about the gathering, but Greypaw says, "You'll hear about it later if I know those two." Then Ravenpaw is healed. He's back doing training. They're back in the training hollow, the sandy hollow, where the apprentices train. Greypaw's playing, scooping leaves into the air and leaping after them. Firepaw's watching him, but Ravenpaw sits quietly at one side of the hollow, looking tense and unhappy. Greypaw says, "Cheer up, Ravenpaw. I know you don't like training, but you're not usually this miserable." And then Lionheart and Tigerclaw approach. Ravenpaw says, "I suppose I'm just worried about my shoulder getting hurt again." Tigerclaw emerges from the bushes and he says, "Warriors should suffer their pain silently. You need to learn to hold your tongue." "Oh, brother, boomer mentality. I suffered, so you should too. Like, give it up." Greypaw whispers, "Tigerclaw's a bit grumpy today." Lionheart catches this and he kind of glares at Greypaw, but then he says, "Today we're going to practice stalking. Now there's a big difference between creeping up on a rabbit and creeping up on a mouse. Can any of you tell me why?" Firepaw has no idea, and Ravenpaw seems to have taken Tigerclaw's comment to heart and was holding his tongue. "Come on," snorted Tigerclaw impatiently. It was Greypaw who answered, "Because a rabbit will smell you before he sees you, but a mouse will feel your paw steps through the ground before he even smells you." "Exactly, Greypaw. So what must you bear in mind when hunting mice?" "Step lightly," Firepaw suggested. Lionheart looked approvingly at him. "Quite right, Firepaw. You must take all your weight into your haunches so that your paws make no impact on the forest floor." "Let's try it." Firepaw watched as Greypaw and Ravenpaw immediately dropped into a stalking crouch. "Nicely done, Greypaw," meowed Lionheart as the two apprentices began to move forward stealthily. "Keep your rear down, Ravenpaw. You look like a duck," spat Tigerclaw. "Now you try it, Firepaw." Firepaw crouched down and began to creep across the forest floor. He felt himself fall instinctively into the right position, and as he stepped forward as silently and lightly as he could, he felt a glow of pride that his muscles responded so smoothly. Tigerclaw says, "Well, it's obvious you've known nothing but softness. You stalk like a lumbering kitty pet. Do you think dinner is going to come and lie down in your food dish and wait to be eaten?" He sucks. So Firepaw, he really wants to learn and listen, and so he kind of sits up quickly, and he seems a little ashamed, and Lionheart says, his pace and forward movement will come later, but his crouch is perfectly balanced. Tigerclaw says, which is better than Ravenpaw, I suppose. Even after 2 moons of training, you're still putting all your weight on your left side. Ravenpaw looks even more dejected, and Firepaw is done with Tigerclaw's bullying, and so he blurts out, his injury is bothering him, that's all. Tigerclaw whipped his head around and glared at Firepaw. Injuries are a fact of life. He should be able to adapt. Even you, Firepaw, have learned something this morning. If Ravenpaw picked up things as quickly as you, he'd be a credit to me instead of an embarrassment. Imagine being shown up by a kitty pet, he spat angrily at his apprentice. That's so out of pocket. Again, imagine having beef with a 12-year-old when you're like 40. Like, this is like the worst co-worker arrangement ever. And then Greypaw comes in, he's like, well, I'm more lopsided than a one-legged badger. And he breaks off from his careful stalking to stagger comically across the clearing. I think I'll have to settle for hunting stupid mice. They won't stand a chance. I shall just wander up to them and sit on them till they surrender. I love him. 10 out of 10. No notes. Lionheart says, all right, Greypaw, stop joking around. Perhaps you might focus your mind better if you try out your stalking for real. And then all the apprentices lock in. Lionheart says, I want each one of you to try catching real prey. Ravenpaw, you look beside the owl tree. Greypaw, there might be something in that big bramble patch over there. And you, Firepaw, follow the rabbit track over that rise. You'll find the dry bed of a winter stream. You may find something there. With the blood pounding in his ears, Firepaw crept slowly over the rise. Sure enough, a stream bed cut through the trees ahead of him. In Leafall, he guessed it would carry the rainwater away from the forest and into the great river that cut through Riverglen territory. Now it was dry. Firepaw crept quietly down the bank and crouched on its sandy floor. Every sense felt on fire with tension. Silently, he scanned the empty stream for signs of life. He watched for any tiny movement, his mouth open so he could pick up the smallest scent, his ears twisted forward. Then he smelled mouse. He recognized the odor instantly, remembering his first taste the night before. Wild energy surged through him, but he remained motionless, trying desperately to pinpoint the prey. He strained his ears forward until he picked up the rapid pulsing of a tiny mouse heart. Then a flash of brown caught his eye. The creature was scrambling through the long grass that draped the edges of the stream. Firepaw shifted closer, remembering to keep his weight on his haunches until he was within striking distance. Then he pushed back hard on his hindpaws and sprang, kicking up sand as he rose. The mouse raced away, but Firepaw was quicker. He scooped it into the air with one paw, threw it onto the sandy stream bed, and lunged on top of it. He killed it quickly with one sharp bite. Firepaw carefully lifted the warm body between his teeth and returned with his tail held high to the hollow where Tigerclaw and Lionheart waited. He had made his first kill. He was a true ThunderClan apprentice now. That's the end of Chapter 5. Chapter 6. So, Firepaw, he's been given a solo mission to hunt Freshkill for the clan. He comes across some fox scent. He still hasn't seen a fox properly. He kind of struggles to screen out the smell of the fox and concentrate on prey scent. But suddenly he picks up a water vole, busy about its nest by a stream. A moment later he saw the vole. The fat brown body was darting back and forth along the bank as it gathered grass stalks. Firepaw's mouth watered in anticipation. His last meal had been many hours ago, but he dared not hunt for himself until the clan had been fed. He remembered the words repeated by Lionheart and Tigerclaw time and time again. The clan must be fed first. I wonder if this will come into play later. He drops into a crouch and begins to stalk the creature. He crept closer, his eyes never leaving his prey. Almost there. Another moment, and he would be near enough to spring. Suddenly there was a loud rustle in the ferns behind him. The water vole's ears twitched, and it disappeared down a hole in the bank. Firepaw felt the hackles rising along his spine. Whatever had ruined his first good chance of catching prey would have to pay. He sniffed the air. He could tell it was a cat, but he realized with a jolt that he couldn't identify which clan it belonged to. The stale stench of fox still confused his smell sense. A growl rose in his throat as he began doubling back in a wide circle. He pricked up his ears and opened his eyes wide, seeking out any movement. He heard the undergrowth rustle again. It was louder now, off to one side. Firepaw edged closer. He could see the ferns moving, but the fronds still hid the enemy from view. A twig snapped with a sharp cracking noise. From the noise it's making, it must be big, Firepaw thought, preparing himself for a fierce battle. He leaped for the trunk of an ash and climbed swiftly and silently up to an overhanging branch. Below him, the invisible warrior came closer and closer still. Firepaw held his breath, judging his moment as the ferns were pushed aside and a large grayish shape emerged. Grawr! The battle cry rumbled in Firepaw's throat. Claws unsheathed, he launched himself at the enemy and landed squarely on a set of furry, muscular shoulders. He dug in hard, gripping with thorn-sharp claws, ready to deal out a powerful warning bite. What's that? The body below him shot straight up in the air, carrying him with it. Greypaw? Firepaw recognized the voice and caught his friend's familiar smell, but he was too fired up to loosen his grip. Ambush! Meow! Spat Greypaw, not realizing that the cat gripping onto his back was Firepaw. He rolled over and over in an attempt to dislodge his attacker. Firepaw rolled with him, squashed and flattened beneath Greypaw. "It's me, Firepaw!" he yelled as he struggled to pull free and sheath his claws. Rolling away, he springs to his feet and gave himself a shake. "Greypaw, it's me. I thought you were an enemy warrior." Greypaw winced and shook himself. "Felt like it," he grumbled, twisting his head around to lick his sore shoulders. "You've raked me to shreds." Firepaw says, "Sorry, but what was I supposed to think with you creeping up on me like that?" "Creeping up?" Greypaw's eyes were round with indignation. "That was my best stealth crouch." "Stealth? You still stalk like a lopsided badger," Firepaw teased. He flattened his ears playfully. Greypaw gave a hiss of delight. "I'll show you lopsided." Aw, they're flirting. And then they start play fighting again. This goes on for a good bit, and Firepaw wins the fight, but Greypaw's unbothered because it's a really nice day out. Honestly, valid. If it's a nice day out, nothing could bother me. Greypaw says, "So how are you getting on with your task?" Firepaw says, "I was doing just fine till you came along. I was about to catch a vole when your noisy trampling frightened it off." Greypaw says, "Oh, I'm sorry," and Firepaw says, "That's okay. You didn't know. Anyway, shouldn't you be heading to meet the patrol on the WindClan border? I thought you had to give them a message from Blue Star." Greypaw says, "Yeah, but there's plenty of time. I was going to do a little hunting first. I'm starving." Firepaw says, "Me too, but I've got to hunt for the clan before I can hunt for myself." Greypaw says, "I bet Dustpaw and Sandpaw used to swallow a shrew or two when they were on hunting duty." Firepaw says, "I wouldn't be surprised if they did, but this is my first solo assignment. And you want to do it right, I know." Greypaw sighed. "What is the message from Blue Star anyway?" Firepaw asked, changing the subject. Greypaw says she wants the patrol to wait at the Great Sycamore until she joins them at Sunhigh. Seems that some Shadow Clan cats have been prowling around. Blue Star wants to check things out. Firepaw tells him he should probably get going. Greypaw says the hunting grounds aren't too far from here. There's plenty of time, and he wants to help out after losing Firepaw, the vole. Firepaw says, "It doesn't matter. I'll find another. It's such a warm day. There should be quite a few out and about." Greypaw says, "True, but you still have to catch them. You know, that could take you until way past Sunhigh, maybe even until sunset." Firepaw agrees. And he's really hungry. He thinks it'll probably take that long. "I owe you that at least. We should be able to catch a couple of voles before I have to get going." So they start hunting again. They come across the fox scent that Firepaw smelled earlier. And Firepaw says, "Doesn't it smell fresher to you now?" Greypaw sniffed again and says, "You're right. Look." Firepaw looked. He saw something red and thick-haired moving among the bushes. It stepped into a clearing in the undergrowth, and Firepaw saw a low body, glinting red in the dappled sunlight. Its tail was heavily furred, and it had a long, narrow snout. "So that's a fox?" Firepaw whispered. "What an ugly muzzle." "You can say that again," agreed Greypaw. "I was following one of those when we first... met," whispered Firepaw. "It's a little gay." "More likely it was following you, you idiot," hissed Greypaw. "Never trust a fox. Looks like a dog, behaves like a cat. We must warn the queens that one has strayed into our territory. Foxes are as bad as badgers when it comes to killing young kids. I'm just glad you didn't catch up with the one you saw last time. He'd have made mouse meat out of a tiny scrap like you." Firepaw looked a little put out, and Greypaw added, "You'll stand a better chance these days, though. Anyway, Blue Star will probably send a warrior patrol to scare it off. Put the queen's minds at rest." And then they continue along. Firepaw asks what a badger looks like, and Greypaw says, "Black and white, short legs. You'll know one when you meet one. They're bad-tempered, lumbering animals. They're less likely to raid the nursery than a fox, but they have a vicious bite. How do you think old Halftail earned his name? He hasn't been able to climb a tree since a badger bit his tail off." Firepaw asks, "Why not?" Greypaw says, "Scared of falling. A cat needs his tail if he wants to land on his feet. It helps him spin in midair." So, that's a fun fact of the day. I'm not sure if that's true or not. Someone look that up to confirm. So they go hunting. Hunting was good. They each caught a little something, and then they go and chase after a squirrel. They lose the squirrel, but they realize they're at the Thunderpath. And then they come out of the forest to look at the Thunderpath. Greypaw says it's really stinky. Firepaw agrees. He asks Greypaw if he's ever been across the Thunderpath. Greypaw says no. Firepaw took a step out of the cover of the forest. A border of oily grass lay between the trees and the Thunderpath. He crept slowly out onto it and then shrank back as a stinking monster hurtled past. "Hey, where are you going?" Greypaw mewed. Firepaw didn't reply. He waited till there were no monsters in sight. Then he edged forward again, across the grass, right to the edge of the path. Cautiously, he reached out a paw to touch it. It felt warm, almost sticky, heated by the sun. He looked up, staring across the Thunderpath. Was that a pair of eyes glinting out of the forest on the other side? He sniffed the air, but smelled nothing except the stench of the great gray path. The eyes on the other side were still shining in the shadows. Then they blinked, slowly. Firepaw was sure now. It was a Shadow Clan warrior, and it was staring straight at him. "Firepaw!" Greypaw's voice made Firepaw jump, just as a huge monster, taller than a tree, roared past his nose. The wind from it almost toppled him over. Firepaw turned and ran as fast as he could back into the safety of the forest. Greatpaw is pretty mad at him. He says, "You mouse-brained fool, what were you doing?" Firepaw says he just wondered what the Thunderpath felt like. Greatpaw says, "Come on, let's get out of here." Once they leave the Thunderpath and get to safety, Firepaw says, "I think I saw a ShadowClan warrior in the forest on the other side of the Thunderpath." Greatpaw is incredulous. He says, "Wow, really?" And Firepaw says, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure." "Well, it's a good thing that monster came past when it did," retorted Greatpaw. "Where there's one ShadowClan warrior, there's more, and we're no match for them yet. We better get out of here." He looked up at the sun, which was almost directly overhead. "I better get a move on if I want to meet that patrol on time," he mewed. "See you later." He sprang away into the undergrowth, calling as he went, "You never know. Lionheart might let me come and help you with the hunting once I've delivered this message." Firepaw watched him go. He envied Greypaw, wishing he were off to join a warrior patrol. But at least he'd have something to tell Dustpaw and Sandpaw when he returned to camp. Today, he had seen his first ShadowClan warrior. And that's the end of Chapter 6. Okay, so now we're going to get into Chapter 7. So we pick up right where we left off, where Greypaw just left on his little mission. Firepaw retraces his steps and heads back towards the stream. He's still thinking of those eyes burning from the darkness of ShadowClan territory. He catches a faint smell on the breeze. A stranger, perhaps that ShadowClan warrior. The scent message told him many things. The stranger was a she-cat, not young and definitely not from ThunderClan. She carried no distinct scent from any of the clans, but Firepaw could tell she was tired, hungry, and sick, and she was in an ugly mood. Dropping low, Firepaw moved forward, heading toward the scent. Then he paused in puzzlement. The warrior's scent was fainter now. He sniffed again. Suddenly, with a lightning movement, a snarling ball of fur burst from the bushes behind him. Firepaw screeched in shock as the she-cat slammed into him, knocking him sideways. Two heavy paws clamped down onto his shoulders, and iron jaws closed around the back of his neck. He forced himself to go limp, relaxing his muscles as if in submission, and let out a pretend howl of alarm. The she-cat opened her mouth to give a triumphant yowl. "Ah, a puny apprentice. Easy prey for Yellowfang," she hissed. "Yes! Yes! Oh my god!" This is one of the best characters in this arc, if not the entire series, in my opinion, as a professional fan. At the insult, Firepaw felt a surge of fury. Just wait. He'd show this coughed-up furball what kind of warrior he was. But not yet, he told himself. Wait until you feel her teeth again. Yellowfang bit down. Firepaw surged upward with all the strength in his powerful young body. The she-cat gave a snarl of surprise as she was thrown clear. She tumbled backward into a gorse bush. Firepaw says, "Not such easy prey, huh?" Yellowfang hissed defiance as she tore herself free from the clinging branches. "Not bad, young apprentice, but you'll need to do a lot better." Firepaw blinked when he saw his opponent clearly for the first time. The she-cat had a broad, almost flat face and round orange eyes. Her dark gray fur was long and matted into smelly clumps. Her ears were torn and ragged, and her muzzle was traced with the scars of many old battles. Firepaw stands his ground. He says, "You're in ThunderClan's hunting ground. Move on." Yellowfang says, "Who's gonna make me? I will hunt. Then I will leave. Or maybe I'll just stay a while." "Enough talk," Firepaw spat, feeling the stir of ancient cat spirits deep inside him. There was no trace of the house cat in him now. His warrior blood was up. He was itching to fight, to defend his territory and protect his clan. Bro thinks he's the Avatar. Yellowfang senses the change in him, and she realizes that he's actually going to attack her. So she dips her head and breaks eye contact and starts to back off. "No need to be hasty now," she purred in a silky tone. Firepaw is not fooled. So he jumps on her and attacks her, and they start fighting. His back paw catches the side of Yellowfang's head. The force of it sends shockwaves up his front leg. "Yow!" Stunned Yellowfang dropped onto four paws. She shook her head to clear it. In the single heartbeat before the she-cat recovered, Firepaw saw his chance. He threw himself forward, crouching low, and clamped his jaws tight on Yellowfang's back leg. Ugh! The taste of the matted fur was horrible, but he chomped down hard. "Row, row, row!" Yellowfang screamed in agony and whipped around to snap at Firepaw's tail. I'm thoroughly enjoying the written out noises. Like, when I'm doing these cat noises, I'm not making them up as I go. These are literally written in the pages. It's hilarious. Up close, the message of desperation and weakness and the aching void of the she-cat's hunger was almost painful. Something stirred inside him, an unwarrior-like feeling he didn't want. Pity. He tried not to dwell on this instinct. He knew his loyalty must be to his clan. But he couldn't shake free of it. Firepaw discovers empathy. He remembers Lionheart's words about speaking from his heart and it making him a stronger warrior. And then he remembers Tigerclaw's words about his heart making him give in to kitty pet weakness right at the moment of attack. So he's having like a angel devil moment here. Yellowfang tries to attack him again, but since her leg is now wounded, she can't attack as strong. Moments later, they broke apart. Firepaw was gasping for breath now, but he sensed that Yellowfang was weakening. The she-cat was badly wounded, and her back legs could barely support her scrawny body. Had enough yet? Firepaw growled. If the intruder gave way, he'd let her go with just a warning bite to remember him by. Never! Yellowfang hissed back bravely, but her injured leg gave way and she slumped to the ground. She tried to get up and failed. Her eyes were dull as she hissed up at Firepaw. If I weren't so hungry and tired, I'd have shredded you into mouse dust. The she-cat's mouth twisted in pain and defiance. Finish me off. I won't stop you. Firepaw hesitates. He's never killed another cat before. What are you waiting for? Yellowfang taunted. You're dithering like a kitty pet. And, of course, here comes the slur again. So Firepaw gets pretty upset at this, and he wonders if she can still smell the scent of two legs on him, even now after all this time. He says, I'm an apprentice warrior of ThunderClan. Yellowfang knows she's hit a nerve, so she says, Ha! Don't tell me ThunderClan is so desperate they have to recruit kitty pets now. Firepaw says, ThunderClan is not desperate. Yellowfang claps back and says, Prove it then. Act like a warrior and finish me off. You'll be doing me a favor. Firepaw stared at her. He would not be goaded into killing this miserable creature. He felt his muscles relax as curiosity prickled him. How had a clan cat gotten in such a state? ThunderClan elders were looked after better than kits. Which is kind of insane to me, because, kits are the future. Elderly cats, they're on their way out. Obviously still care for them, but kits should be really... Anyway, Firepaw says, You seem in an awful hurry to die. Aren't we all? Yellowfang says, Yeah, well, that's my business, mouse fodder. Mouse fodder. I don't even know what that's supposed to mean. That's an old head cat insult, I guess. What's your problem, kitty? Are you trying to talk me to death? Her words were brave, but Firepaw could smell the hunger and sickness that were coming off the other cat in waves. She was going to die anyway if she didn't eat soon. And since she could hardly hunt for herself, perhaps he should kill her now. They both kind of stare at each other. Wait here, Firepaw ordered at last. Yellowfang deflates and says, Are you kidding, kitty? I'm going nowhere. And then she flops down and begins to lick her leg wound. Firepaw glanced briefly over his shoulder at her and hissed quietly in exasperation before heading for the trees. He's so funny. So he catches her a rabbit. In the world of cats, a rabbit is a big piece of prey. That's not a mouse or a shrew or even a squirrel. Yellowfang looked up tiredly as Firepaw dropped the rabbit on the ground beside her. Her grizzled jaw dropped. Well, hello again, kitty. I thought you'd gone to fetch your little warrior friends. Yeah, well, I might still do that. Don't call me kitty, Firepaw growled, shoving the rabbit nearer with his nose. He felt embarrassed by his kindness. Empathy being embarrassing is so capitalism coded. It's so fascism capitalism coded. He's been here for what, a day? 2 days maybe, and he already feels bad about caring for other people. The connection between warrior cats and capitalism. Maybe the Erins were onto something. Anyway, Firepaw says, Look, if you don't want this... No, Yellowfang meowed hastily. I do want it. And so Firepaw watches her just, absolutely devour this rabbit. And he gets really hungry. And now he knows he shouldn't even be thinking about eating. He still had to take back enough prey for the clan, but it smelled delicious. A few minutes later, Yellowfang gave a huge sigh and flopped onto her side. First fresh kill I've had in days. She licked her muzzle clean and settled down to give herself a thorough wash. As if one wash is going to make much different, Firepaw thought, his nose twitching. She was the arch cat of stench. 10 out of 10. No notes. Amazing insult. So he's eyeing up the remains of the prey, and he gives in to his hunger and eats the rest of the rabbit. Yellowfang watched him closely, showing her stained teeth. Better than the muck Two Legs feeds some of our brothers, isn't it? She mewed slyly. Knowing she had found his sore spot, she was trying to antagonize him. Firepaw ignores her and begins to clean himself. It's poison, Yellowfang went on. Rat droppings. Only a spineless bag of fur would accept such disgusting frog spawn. She broke off and tensed. Shh. Warrior's coming. Uh-oh. Firepaw was also aware of cats approaching. He could hear their soft paw fall on the leaf litter and the sound of fur swishing through branches. He smelled the wind brushing against their coats. Familiar smells. These were ThunderClan warriors, confident enough in their own territory not to care about the noise they made. Firepaw licked his lips guiltily, hoping to wash away any traces of the scraps he just swallowed. Then he looked at Yellowfang and the fresh pile of rabbit bones that lay beside her. The clan must be fed first. Lionheart's voice rang through his head once more. But surely he would understand why Firepaw had fed this wretched creature. His mind reeled, suddenly fearful of what would happen to him. his first apprentice task, and he had ended up breaking the warrior code. And that's the end of chapter 7, and that's where we're going to end today. Now that I'm, reading this again, I'm sort of also realizing the connection between, again, capitalism and warrior cats. Like, not to be woke, but I'm noticing connections. The clan must be fed first. That's a rule, which, honestly, valid. But the sentence, Firepaw hopes Lionheart understands why he had fed this wretched creature. And I think that is kind of a parallel between us as humans and us, like, giving money to the homeless. It's very looked down upon. It's illegal in some places, I think. And they're not allowed to sleep outside, so it's like a whole thing. I mean, this is 2003, so they're kind of woke about this already. Anyway, that is the end of this episode of Cat Tales. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for listening. If you have any opinions or thoughts, I would love to hear them. You can leave them in the comments. Or you can follow me on Twitter at notcoffee1, and the O's are zeros. And I will see you in the next one, where we find out if Firepaw gets in trouble. Uh-oh. Alright, goodbye.